History seeps from every soot-black rock of this old capital. When England broke with Rome in the 1530s, the Brexit of the Tudor age, Henry VIII sent an invading army to Edinburgh to try to keep Scotland on his side rather than Europe's.
The English army landed down there at the port of Leith and advanced up this road in vast numbers, laying waste to the neighbouring borough of Canongate. And when they breached the city walls, they destroyed much of the ancient medieval heart of Edinburgh. And the point was control. They wanted to wrest power away from those factions in Scottish society that favoured alliances with the French and hand it to those who wanted to draw Scotland in to the English fold.
That Anglo-Scottish war came to be known as the Rough Wooing. Scotland is once again torn between factions, some pro-British, others pro-European. The wooing of the Scots has changed a bit since the 16th century, though.
England pours men and resources into it when they arrive with a huge fleet and then send thousands of men up to attack Edinburgh. They turn up with artillery weapons. Then you do have a situation where parts of the town are actually set on fire. There's huge damage done to the Canongate. You have damage done to Holyrood Palace and Holyrood Abbey. So it's really attacking a lot of the heart of the Kingdom of Scotland.
Theresa May's approach to wooing the Scots needs to be a bit more solicitous than that, but the aim is in essence the same: to keep Scotland on board, to make sure that pro-Union sentiment prevails over pro-European.
So in the mid-16th century, you have Scotland divided in its loyalties between alliance with England and a European destination.
Absolutely, and I think in both cases you have Scots not necessarily being totally comfortable with either outcome.
Edinburgh's architecture celebrates the age when commitment to the Union was unassailable. England and Scotland joined in the great enterprise of Britishness, and often a Britishness that stood against the perceived menace of continental Europe.
There have been tensions before between these two identities in Scotland, the country's sense of its Britishness and its Europeanness. Until recently, it could quite happily be both, but not anymore. A second referendum will bring that tension to the fore and confront Scotland with a simple choice. Which would you rather be, British or European?
The port of Leith, where that English army landed, was once Scotland's great gateway to trade with Europe, before the Union, when Scotland turned west to the wide open seas and the British Empire. But Scotland voted 62% to stay in Europe. Many see that as a chance to forge a new place in the world as an independent state.
It seems as if England is on a self-destruct path, and because it's the largest part of the UK population, it's determined to bring everyone with it. We talked a lot in the first referendum about Scotland having a distinctive political culture. An awful lot of people didn't see that. The second they saw that 62%, they saw it.
But only 45% voted for independence in 2014, and about a third of them also voted to leave the EU. There are dangers for Nicola Sturgeon in tying the case for independence too closely to the case for Europe.
Of course there are people within Scotland and within the independence movement who don't like the idea of Europe one iota. There has to be more drive and focus and progressive thinking and unity from Europe. Denmark, Finland, Scotland, Sweden, a row of little independent northern states determined to break up that hegemony of France and Germany and rewrite the character of Europe.
But how entrenched is Scotland's European identity? The age demographics don't look good for the Union. Polls show the young tend to favour independence as well as staying in Europe. At Leith Academy, 36 languages are spoken. Tomorrow's voters have multiple, overlapping, sometimes conflicting loyalties.
I'd probably go for European because I grew up with a lot of European culture in my house.
I don't know, just feel like I'm more European than I would say I'm British.
Harry, if it came choice between being European or being British, what is it for you?
British, because I've got a large... I'd really classify myself as European.
Do you see a tension between the values that Britain represents and the values that Scotland represents?
Yeah, because I always feel like there's always been a big tension between Scotland and England, and I'd identify myself more as Scottish if it came to values.
I think we have completely different values. To be Britain kind of represents imperialistic, capitalistic, unfair society where, you know, people don't matter, whereas in Scotland we're more equal and we're inclusive and we care about trying to help each other and trying to make everyone better, not just the people at the top.
I'm British, and I think I've hit into the culture down in England as well as in Scotland.
But if Brexit makes Scots incline more to a European worldview, it also changes the independence proposition. It adds an important new obstacle, the prospect of a hard border across the island of Britain. Jim Gallagher was a senior civil servant who has worked for decades on relations between Scotland and Westminster, and was a leading thinker in the pro-union camp in 2014.
Outside the single market, and if the UK is outside the customs union, you're talking about some form of border control and some substantial restriction on trade between Scotland and England. And since England is by far Scotland's biggest market, the economic effects of that are very real. Not to mention even potentially the effects on the movement of people.
He needs no wooing from London, rough or otherwise. Like Scotland itself, he voted to stay in both unions, but he's clear about which matters more.
What it does do for the proponents of independence is give them a new emotional case. The English are different from us, they say. Well, I rather suspect that in the long run, the English are really much more like us than we are like the rest of Europe.
Henry VIII's English army made it this far to the gates of Edinburgh Castle, but the castle held out and Scotland stayed for now in the French embrace. The English went home to work out why burning down the capital city didn't win them the friendship of the Scots.
That phrase, rough wooing, comes from a comment attributed to the 4th Earl of Huntly, who said of the English, "We did not like the manner of their wooing and could not stoop to be bullied into love." That theme runs through Scottish history like a thread through cloth, unbroken. The Union has been at its strongest when Scotland has felt concrete reason to love the shared enterprise of Britishness, whatever it is at the time. It's been at its weakest when England, through sheer superiority of numbers, has felt entitled to impose on Scotland something Scotland has rejected.
England and Scotland married in the end, and the marriage has lasted more than 300 years. But they are leading increasingly separate lives these days, especially at the ballot box. We are in a new wooing season. The manner of that wooing could determine whether their union survives.